Hi everyone, Lee Scott here. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. I'm so excited that you're here to listen and talk about life, leadership, and legacy. And before I introduce my very, very special guest, if you have not done it yet, go and subscribe today to Leading with Lee on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. So my very, very special guest today was the first Black person to ever be the nominee for the first Congressional District here in Oklahoma. And also he is an attorney and a very accomplished individual. Please welcome to the podcast and vlog, Kojo Asamoa Caesar. Hey, Kojo, how you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, Lee? Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm truly honored to have you on, Kojo, and it's going to be a fun time. So first of all, how are you doing? It's a interesting time that we're living in. It's obviously when people see these episodes and see most throughout this season, we've been seeing me not being in person with folks. So how have you been doing throughout the pandemic and spending time with your family and take care of the things you need to take care of?
Yeah, it's been a difficult time for everybody, right? I mean, I've not met a person who said that this has been hunky-dory, right? Challenging times, but also time for growth and learning, all right? And so I've just been trying to soak up all the lessons that I can get, and grow from it and use it as a time of reflection, right? And so I think we've all learned so much through this season. And so yeah, so I'll say I'm in a season of stillness, right,
Yeah.
and reflection.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and considering all that has transpired in this last year or so, I think all of us have had to step back and think about what are we doing in the world and what are we trying to bring into the culture. So I think that's a healthy perspective to
Right.
have. So I want to kind of jump right in with you, Kojo. You have accomplished a lot to be so young.
Mhm.
And I think people shouldn't take that lightly, that you're a few years older than me, but just your drive and your determination to pursue your goals and the things that you want to do, I think is a huge thing. So it's funny because I think we've only met maybe a few times, or we kind of known each other through social media and stuff like that, but we have a lot of mutual friends or a lot of mutual people that we both know. And I kind of want to talk about your background. So you're a practicing attorney, but you chose to go and work for Teach for America.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, how did that even come about, and why was that decision made instead of like pursuing, a career like this, a super large law firm or anything like that?
Yeah, man. So yeah, I'm a first generation American born to a single mom who was an immigrant, came from Ghana, West Africa, in pursuit
Wow.
of this notion of the American dream, right? And so that has been a constant theme in my life and my journey, right? And she wasn't able to kind of see that dream come to fruition. She wanted to be a doctor, but her credits didn't transfer from Ghana, and she has to
Wow.
work and go to school, and that struggle. And unfortunately, got sick before she was able to earn her degree
Wow.
here in the States. And then my dad, I didn't meet him until I was 22 years old. Um,
Wow.
and he unfortunately got caught up in the wrong stuff. He was also pursuing a dream, but he got sick and tired of going the straight and narrow, and then went, the drug
Yeah.
trafficking way, and so got incarcerated and deported, right? And
Wow.
so here I am trying to navigate that whole world, living with relatives and all those different things. But I was, fortunate enough by the grace of God to be able to, go to good high school and go to a great college, and then get accepted to law school, the oldest law school in the nation, in Williamsburg, Virginia, called William and Mary, where
Yeah.
the founding fathers attended and all those things. And I was very impressionable and very idealistic, and I've always been searching for purpose. I think because of my unique upbringing, right? And so yeah, so I just had this notion that I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to live my life in service to a cause that was greater than myself.
Yeah.
And in doing my own soul searching and talking to my mom and meeting my dad and finding out their whole journey and story, I came to really be very, on the one hand, feeling survivor's guilt, right? Because, why me? Why did
Right.
I make it
Right.
and not others? But on the other hand, a lot of gratitude, right? And a lot of a sense of to whom much is given, much is required. And I also, my name is Kojo. It's in Ghana, it's the name given to one born on Monday. And so I
Mm.
often joke
Wow.
that I have to enjoy waking up on Monday morning, right? The day
Yeah.
I was born, which means I have to be doing something that is, motivating and I'm passionate about. And so, went to law school, graduated from law school, and then, yeah, decided to make this crazy decision to go into education and become a kindergarten teacher. And because education was the difference maker in my life, right? It's really literally what saved me. It's what put me on the escalator to being able to achieve the American dream, right? And when I went back to Ghana, I actually saw one of my classmates. I spent age 2 to 10 in Ghana and went to school there in my formative years and saw a classmate that was begging for money on the side of the road. Right?
Wow.
And this was somebody who was just as smart as I was, just as capable. We just had these two different paths, all because, right, I had the great fortune, if you will, of being born in the States, of the
Yeah.
sacrifice my mom made to live in a community that had good public schools and I had the chance to go to those schools and, it changed my trajectory. And so I was going to dedicate myself to that cause of putting people on the path to achieving the American dream, or another way of saying that is achieving their highest potential, right? And education was the start of that, right? And so that's what compelled me to make that decision and go into education instead of going to practice law.
Wow. I, I think, Kojo, it takes a great level of humility to say, I could actually pursue this one thing that is self-aggrandizing in many ways, that would actually promote me and move me in the ways that I want to move.
Right.
But it says a lot about your character to say, hey, I'm going to choose not to do that. I'm going to choose to go and do Teach for America, which comparatively, depending on what law you practice, that wages is very different. Extremely different. So
Yeah.
I
So
can
yeah.
only,
So yeah.
oh
I
yeah,
mean, to be specific about that, there was a law firm job that was going to be paying me six figures in Richmond,
wow.
Virginia, and I turned that down and came to Tulsa, Oklahoma, making $32,000 a year to teach kindergarten here. So,
Yeah, I mean that you will ultimately be rewarded for the act of humility and
amen.
service, right?
Amen.
So I think that's super powerful, and I think that will be encouraging for people to hear because they'll recognize that sometimes the right decision doesn't always look like the right decision.
Right.
It'll look
Right.
like Kojo, if you told me that's what you do, I'd probably be like, man, you crazy.
Right. Right.
You bugging, dog.
Right.
You are not really, but it was ultimately the right decision for you at that particular moment. So since you have been in Tulsa, you obviously have made a lot of strides in a lot of areas, right? You have made some great connections. I don't know if did you meet your wife here?
Yeah.
Right. You met your wife here. I mean, these significant impacts have been made on your life in this particular moment. And even moving the conversation along a little bit, I mean, you even got the opportunity to lead a very interesting place that I've found to be interesting in Tulsa in 36 degrees north, right?
Right.
Like how has some of your experiences like from teaching and obviously getting an opportunity to engage entrepreneurs, how is that those unique experience influence how you pursued public service? Like, how did that work out for you?
Yeah. I think it's all about what I call what's your theory of change, right? And
Hmm.
you're trying to make a difference. You're trying to change the status quo, and you want your actions to be leading to that. And you are reflecting on your experience, right? And learning and connecting the dots. And so, um, one of the things that I learned being in the classroom, I thought, man, if we can just fix education, if we can just educate these kids, right, then we solve all of our problems, right?
Yeah.
But I came to find out very quickly that that wasn't the case because, we lived in a community that was deeply segregated.
Right.
a place where North Tulsa, which is predominantly Black, life expectancy was 10 years less than the other parts of town, right? We lived in the food desert.
Right.
Our schools were 49th in the nation in per pupil funding. Our teachers were 47th in terms of teacher pay, right? So you had all these issues. We led the nation in incarceration. And so all those issues show up in the classroom with our kids. They're not just numbers, they're not just data points, right? And so it didn't even matter. Like, obviously, it matters how hard we work to teach our kids and instill in them all the things that they need to succeed. But if that's all we're doing and we're not touching them outside of the classroom and we're
Yeah.
not touching their parents, right, then you're almost spinning your wheels, right? And so you come to broaden. I came to broaden my perspective of my theory of change and what it was really going to take to ensure that all our kids would have the opportunity to fulfill their highest potential, right? So you have to not only educate them and serve them, you have to be able to touch them at home. You have to be able to
Yeah.
touch their parents. You have to make sure their parents have access to jobs, that we have an inclusive economic development ecosystem, and all those different things, right?
Right.
And so that's how those experiences have kind of attached themselves to one another, and now I see how all those dots are connected.
Wow. The theory of change. I think that's a great phrase for people to stick in their mind about what needs to be done in communities and how nothing is separate from each other. Kojo, that's a great perspective about what is happening and what we're dealing with in our society and culture. Kind of staying in that vein, kind of talk to me about, or us really, about that connectivity, really, like dig into that, because I often wonder when we approach these big social topics like education or job opportunities or economic opportunities in communities, how do we figure out how to connect the issues when we talk about them? Because I don't know, it seems like it's hard to wrap my head around sometimes when I'm thinking about it or talking to people about it.
Yeah, a good example. So I had the opportunity to be founding principal of a school called Greenwood Leadership Academy that was founded as part of an initiative of the Met Cares Foundation and
Yeah.
CPS. And the whole goal around that was this sense of collective impact, right? And not only building a school that was going to try to serve the educational needs of our kids and community, but also their social outcomes and economic, outcomes, right? And if you look at it, when folks are looking to move into a community, a lot of times you go on the website of real estate companies, they have the schools, right, and how good the schools
Yes.
are in the community, right, because that impacts whether parents actually move into that community or stay in that
Right.
community. So we have North Tulsa and we have our schools that are at the bottom, right, of all the rankings. What's going to happen is a lot of, let's say, our well-to-do families are either not going to move into North Tulsa, or
Right.
when they become well-to-do, they're going to move out
Out.
of North Tulsa.
Yeah.
Well, when they do that, they're leaving with their dollars, right? They're leaving with their disposable income, right? And that disposable income is what grocery stores look at when they're looking to locate into a
Yes.
community. It's what the
Yes.
movie theater that's looking to locate into a community looks at, right? And so we sometimes wonder, how come North Tulsa is a food desert? How come we don't have the same amenities that other parts of town have? Well, it's all connected, right? Because
Right.
we don't have great schools, and if you don't have great schools, then you don't attract the kinds of people with the kind of disposable income. You don't have the disposable income, you don't attract the amenities and the resources,
Exactly.
right? So
Exactly.
that's just one example. You can go even deeper, right, into how all these different things, but then that also leads to, now you have, right, low income housing, you have public housing,
Right.
right, which, right, also attracts crime, right, and you have high incarceration, you have over policing in
Right.
a lot of these communities, right? So
Yes.
all these things are connected, but it all leads to not being able to give our kids the same opportunities, right, to fulfill the high potential as other kids are. Because all kids come to this world with immense potential,
Yeah.
but they have different possibilities based on the environment that they're coming up in. All right. So,
Right. 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 Great answer, because that literally is one of the I mean, as you well know this, but it keeps like we're seeming like we're having these conversations a lot lately because we're seeing the systemic nature of that very fact that like in order for a community to thrive or even have an opportunity to be successful, like you said, if they're not given the resources to do well, what do you expect? You know, I was thinking about this just recently, and I was talking to somebody because there's some stuff happening in my home state and in my hometown, um, and it's always interesting to me when I hear politicians in Mississippi talk specifically about my hometown of Jackson, which is
Mhm.
a predominantly African American city, and you
Right.
have this situation where they're using this type of rhetoric concerning a black city in a very conservative state, and you're asking yourself like, well, it's only as successful as it is invested in. And I
Mhm.
don't think people actually understand. Well, no, let me rephrase it. People understand. I think I'm giving them a little bit too much of a pass. There are people that are empowered that understand that if you invest into community, it doesn't matter the look of that community, whether black, white, brown, yellow, it doesn't matter. If you invest into communities, they will be successful. And I mean, you hit the nail right on the head, Kojo. Like that's one of the fundamental problems that it seems like it keeps being perpetuated within our culture. And I hope and pray. I'm like, please let this change. Please let us see the type of change that we desire in that. And let me ask you, as it relates to this, because obviously we know we need change, obviously in our systems and in how we operate. But it, how long were you at 36 degrees?
So I was there for 7 months.
Okay,
I was interim executive director, so it was a transitional position.
right.
Yeah.
So, and you have probably have been in a lot of transitional moments, right?
Mhm.
In that time, or as you reflect on that time, what is your thoughts about how business and how entrepreneurs and how maybe even social entrepreneurs can play a role in shaping and transforming communities
Yeah.
in like to help those communities actually move forward? What are some of your thoughts about that?
Yeah, what I realized was, there's no like, entrepreneurship is a lot about ideas, right?
Right.
And turning ideas into um, businesses that solve problems for real people, right? And therefore generates income that makes it worthwhile to continue to do that business. And there's no shortage of ideas in North Tulsa or any communities, right?
Right.
Um, so what ends up happening though a lot of times is because those communities have been disenfranchised from right the mainstream business and entrepreneurship ecosystem, right? There's this sense that we're not capable, right? And then even if you were to say, okay, actually we are capable, we have the ideas, they're just as good as anybody's ideas, but then now you have to find the resources, right, that connect with
Right.
those ideas to actually
Right.
turn it into real businesses. And then you have to also be given a chance to fail, right? Because that's
Yes.
part of the iterative process of entrepreneurship, right?
Yes.
Like you're going to fail, but that's part of the learning and the growth process,
Right.
and then you actually do better. But what ends up happening is that's what we ran into. It's like people are like, well, how come we don't have more people of color, right, in the space, or more people of color starting businesses? Well, they don't. Businesses, its own sector, its own language, right? So we need to actually do education, but not an education in the sense of you don't know anything, let me teach you something. Let me actually show you how the way you're already thinking, the things you're already doing is entrepreneurship, right?
Wow.
It is
Wow.
ways to be able to serve in a
Yeah.
business capacity, right? It's just there's a different vocabulary, and let me just give you the tools, right? And then how do you connect those folks to like mentors who've done this already, right? Who can help you and guide you through the roadblocks that you'll meet and the problems that you'll face, right? So you're not just only learning from your own mistakes, you're learning from others' mistakes. And then where's the capital to say, okay, we're going to invest we're going to give you a small business loan. We're going to give you a no interest loan, right? We're going to put you on the right path to be able to launch this business off the ground, right? And truly serve your community and problems that you face and you know firsthand more than anybody else, right? So you can build the right business around that problem, right? And so that's what we need, and that's the mindset we need to have about it. But like you said, yeah, you do need folks who are going to be champions, who are going to trust and believe, and invest in, communities that have been historically disinvested in.
Oh, I loved your answer. That's such a great answer and great perspective. I it literally, Kojo, it made me think about how often we don't recognize that people need chances to fail. Like that statement, chances to fail, is something I think discourages a lot of people of color and just people in general, a lot of people of color, a lot of women from like really pursuing business because
Right,
they're in their mind, they think that it's impossible for me because I only got one chance.
right, right, right.
Like, what are some things that you would encourage people to think about as it relates to that? Because that seems like an internal obstacle that people deal with, and they're
Yeah,
trying to figure out how to move beyond that.
yeah. There's one of my favorite quotes, says, fail faster to succeed sooner. All right.
Mm,
And
wow.
that is the mindset, kind of like learning how to ride a bicycle. Right. The only way you learn is through failing. Right? And
Yeah.
so when it comes to really pretty much everything, failure is a part of the process. But you're right. A lot of times the environments we come up in, the systemic issues that are, that exist kind of discourage us and kind of send a message to us that we don't have many shots at it and that failure is fatal, right? But failure is not fatal. And we also have to know that, matter of fact, you learn more from your failures than you do your successes, right?
Yeah.
And so, how do you embrace that as a ethos in your life? And just say, I'm going to fail, and even if nobody believes in me, even if I don't have the same resources, And you're right. A lot of times you get caught up in the systemic issues, and they're real, but the world doesn't owe you understanding and nobody's going to care anyway, right? So at the end of
Right.
the day, you have
Right.
to believe in yourself and you have to say, I'm not going to make any excuses, right? I'm going to overcome whatever barriers exist. I have the will, I have the intelligence, I have the power, I have the strength, and I'm going to go for it, right? And I think that's what we need to, if we have that mindset, that will probably take us further in overcoming those systemic barriers than just having the woe is me kind of attitude.
Yeah, yeah. I admire your optimism. I really do because it kind of you kind of me into the next thing I was going to talk to you about because obviously you had a historical year last year, right? You were the first black person to be the nominee for any major party in the
Mhm.
first congressional district for the state of Oklahoma, and then you're the first, probably first person of color, probably. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but also the youngest.
All right. Okay.
What talk to me about that experience because I think that as someone who someday God willing wants to run for office in his home state and has kind of been around politics and know people in politics, but seeing like there's so much that's going on. Like, what was that experience like for you? And what did you learn in that process of, and how did you like preserve your authenticity in that process too?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a loaded question because there were a lot of lessons, all right, to go around. But like you said, authenticity is important. And you have to, I think my lack of experience gave me the boldness
Yeah.
to be authentic because I didn't know what other way to be, right? I
Right.
didn't know that when you were asked a question, you're supposed to not answer the question.
Oh yeah, man.
So I just answered the question, right? And I kind of spoke, my mind. And so that's how I went. But yeah, I mean, so when you do that, it's it can often be polarizing,
Right.
which has its benefits and its drawbacks, because now people are like, wow, you're a breath of fresh air, right? You're
Right.
authentic, you're speaking your truth, and
Right.
I relate to it, and they become passionate about supporting you.
Right.
But then the opposition becomes just as passionate about,
Right.
their opposition to you
Right.
and wanting to defeat you, right? And not just opposition in the other party, right? Even opposition within your own party, right? Which is the most surprising thing to me.
Yeah.
Is I started off the campaign with a 50 and 50 initiative. That's what we called it. We held 50 events in the first 50 days of the campaign, just to meet people around the district, introduce ourselves, and then listen to them. And so coming off of this, we were on a high because we were really making some noise, getting some traction, and we thought the powers that be in our own party will say, "Wow, look at this guy! He's gone out there, he's taken initiative, done the thing. How can we support him? How can we give
Yeah.
him money? How can we give him all the tools he needs to win?" And instead, it was, "Who's this Kojo guy? And who
Yeah.
does he think he is? And how come he didn't talk to this person or talk to that person? How
Right.
come he didn't come kiss the ring?" Right?
Yeah.
And we need to get him out of here. We don't think he's the kind of face that Oklahomans can get behind,
Wow.
right? And so now there was this, you know, kind of campaign to try to find somebody to run against me in the
Wow.
Democratic primary, which was crazy to me. I was not prepared for that at all, right? And it was very disturbing. But I had to also then at that point, when I changed my perspective from just being depressed and woe is me, and realizing who I was and why I was doing this in the first place, I went all in on my authenticity.
Wow.
Okay, fine. This is what you want to do. Then I'm gonna be even that much more real and speak about the process and what's
Right.
happening and how these
Right.
kinds of things happen to folks like me, which prevents us from actually being able to win,
Yes.
right, in places like
Yes.
Oklahoma. Right. So
Yes. And it's something that I heard Stacey Abrams say, and it has stuck with me, is that she talked about in her race for governor,
mm,
how she said literally, I went and competed and talked to everybody.
mhm, mhm.
I and listen, I'm not somebody who's in politics per se. So my opinion is I mean, somebody's probably gonna use this against me, but it is what it is. I have a track record now. If I say anything on the record, it is what it is.
Right, right.
But one of the things that I think you spoke to that is very true is that Democrats, for some reason, I don't know why this is the case,
Mhm,
they tend to not want to compete everywhere.
mhm,
And the reality is what validates a candidate is winning, right?
mhm.
Like, we didn't think we could have a black president until Barack Obama won.
Right,
It,
right,
like, it is it's not smart. It's just not smart strategy. I mean, in any circumstance, and not just in politics, but just in life.
right,
If we are expecting everyone or what we have seen to be the same, and we keep picking safe people, we'll never progress.
right, right,
And like, and that's just with anything in life for any business. If they're considering hiring a VP or putting somebody in position, they tend to get this cookie cutter type person that they're used to, that
right.
doesn't challenge the status quo, that doesn't push them to grow, doesn't actually require more of them. It Kojo, that's interesting because what it exposes is the fact that we live in a society and culture that is unwilling to actually understand that you can talk about diversity, you can talk about uniqueness, you can talk about all these different things, but when the rubber meets the road, as my grandma would say,
Right.
when it's in the heat of the moment, what are you going to do to ensure that this unique candidate or this unique person or this unique perspective, this diversity of ideas is at the
Right.
forefront of what we're trying to do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People like change in theory, right? But not in practice, right? Because in practice, we prefer comfort. What
Yes.
makes us comfortable? What are we used to,
Yes.
right? Or even this whole notion of speaking truth to power. People like you to speak truth to power when they don't see themselves with the power and it's somebody else, right? But when
Right,
you
right, right.
them, I was like, hey, ho, But like, yeah, I mean, and so, but at the end of the day, this is part of the human condition, right? So us who want to change the status quo, who want to be leaders, who want to, right, craft a different future, and do something different than what has been done, we have to, right, continue to move forward and trudge on in the face of all those obstacles, right? And that is the work of leadership. It's that um, you have a vision of a future that is different than what has been or what is. And if it was easy, everybody would do it, right?
Yes.
If it was going
Yes.
to, just make people feel comfortable, it would have already happened. It hasn't happened because those barriers exist. And so how are you going to use your skills, your expertise, your authenticity to push people past that, and to show them that if you just, step outside of that comfort zone, everything that you've been desiring actually lays over there.
Wow. Wow. That's such great perspective because so many people get caught up with a setback. Like it it's I think it just maybe just a reactionary thing that I'm thinking about as you were talking, Kojo, and you're exactly right. I think it's reactionary that a lot of us won't try again
Mhm.
because we are becoming so in a lot of ways we've become so caught up in the fact that, man, I messed up this one time, or when I actually tried, it didn't go how I thought it was going to go.
Right.
Like, what are some ways that you can encourage people to keep going and keep trying and keep stepping over those obstacles and keep
Yeah.
pursuing the things that they want to do in life?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. We've been known as the microwave generation, right? And we lack patience. But patience is a part of any great story, right? And any great move. If you're somebody who likes chess, and a lot of times chess is compared to life, it's a game
Oh
of
yeah.
patience, right? It's not checkers where you just move it and boom, you have
Oh
to
yeah,
really
buddy.
take your time, right? See all the pieces on the board, and know that it's gonna end. You're gonna fail sometimes. Sometimes your pawn gets taken off, your queen, you lose your queen, but the game is not over yet, right?
Right. Right.
And so yeah, so I mean, it's all about patience. And you read, I love reading biographies and history, um, and you look at people's journeys and stories, it's littered with failure, right?
Yes.
Failure and
Yes.
patience and picking yourself up and trying again, learning, right, from your mistakes and trying again, not being, ashamed or embarrassed, right, by your failures and learning from that. That's just what it is. And because ultimately it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey, right? It's about who you become in the understand that now, those failures, those delays, that delayed gratification, that patience, all of that is strengthening your character. It's
Right.
strengthening your resolve. It's giving you confidence to face the challenges that are going to come, the challenges that are here, right? And so you actually fall in love with that process.
Right, right. There's such wisdom in that, and I think that that's going to really encourage people to recognize the nature of this moment. That like we cannot come out of the pandemic or whatever happens with the pandemic. We cannot see it as like people are only living through the loss. People are only living through how much stuff has transpired in a negative way in this moment.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are not able to see beyond this present moment. But I think, like you said, Kojo, it's about learning and being patient in this moment and recognizing the values that can grow in us as a result of this moment. I think that's such a healthy and productive perspective that people can have as it relates to this issue. So I'm gonna move on a little bit because I think all your answers are great. And it's been super encouraging for me. And I obviously will be encouraging for people as it relates to just this. But I'm kind of getting to the last few questions that I have for you. Obviously, you're an attorney, you have all these different unique experiences in your life. How are you like taking care of yourself? Like, Get at R&R. How are you navigating this time in a healthy and productive way so that when we come out of this moment in history, you are more stronger, you're wiser, you have the right resources or the right tools in your toolbox to be as effective and sharp in the ways you need to be sharp?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, the answer has been about getting and establishing a routine,
Yeah.
and being very intentional and disciplined about it. Right. And so waking up at the same time every day, early in the morning, you know, taking a walk, right? And not neglecting that, right? And that walk is it's not only good physically, but it's good mentally, right? Because you get to think about, all the things that you need to think through and think about. And it's a quiet time, and so it just strengthens you for the day and whatever decisions and challenges are coming, with that. I'm also a person of faith, and so I'm doing a morning devotional, every day and reading the Word of God, right? And getting encouragement from that. Um, and then, also just reading every day, find a book and actually reading that book that's going to help you grow in your personal journey and reflect on who you are and, where you need to improve and where you need to grow. And so, like, those things are very important, right? And it gives you this sense that, because I think, what we've learned through this pandemic, if nothing else, is that sometimes you need to take a step back and pause, right? And reflect. I think a lot of people become very reflective. Whereas when the world was going, we're just going,
Yeah.
doing,
Yeah.
comparing our lives to others, feeling bad
Mhm.
because our real life doesn't compare to somebody else's highlights and all those different things. And so this pandemic slowed us down and got us to really think about who we are, our values, our flaws, our strengths, how we can improve, planning to actually improve, and what we want the future to look like. And so yeah, so it's been good to have that chance to really do that and not feel guilty about it, right? Because a lot of times our world makes you feel guilty, like you gotta be grinding, no days
Yes.
off, and all those different things. I
Yeah.
hope we can get beyond that kind of mindset when we come out of
Right. And to your point, there's no wisdom in that.
this.
It really isn't.
Right.
Like you're just exhausted all the time. Like rest is a good and healthy thing. And I think throughout this season, even on leading, I have heard people say a lot about resting, a lot about taking inventory. So I think you're that's been a running theme throughout a lot of episodes of this season. I think there's such wisdom. And you kind of mentioned some of the things that you're reading. Like, what are some of the other things that you're reading and maybe listening to kind of recharge and really grow more specifically? Because I hope that everybody that listens to this or watches this write some of that stuff down and be like, what is Kojo reading? And I might need to get on that.
Yeah, I've actually fallen in love with an author called Ron Holiday, and he's very passionate about Stoicism and the Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, and kind of the wisdom, right, of those guys, and this notion of temperance and stillness and patience and self-control and justice. And so there was a book I read called The Obstacle Is the Way by Ryan Holiday, which was awesome book I recommend to anybody, especially in this season, right? Because it's really about how you shift your perspective around the challenges and obstacles that you face in your life, and how those things, if you shift your perspective, are actually there to propel you to exactly where you want to go and where you want to be. Right? And so imagine being cheerful in the face of challenges, right? Imagine saying, oh, wow, this is such a huge challenge in my life right now. It must mean I'm about to go to the next level, right? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
and so that was really great book. And then I actually was so wanting more from him. I read my next book was Stillness Is the Key. It's also by Ryan Holiday. And then that is about the importance of stillness and how throughout history, all of our kind of people that we look up to, right, who faced down tremendous crises and challenges, right, it was because they had this quality of stillness, right, and they were able to go to that place, right, in that zone, if you will, where they quiet the mind, right. They're not comparing themselves to other people. They're able to take criticism. They're able to fail and not feel like they are failures. Right? So stillness is the key and cultivating that. So that's the opposite of grind, 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 grind. This is no, actually, you take time and you're still and you have a sound mind and you have enough rest and you're eating right and you're healthy. It actually impacts your ability to produce. Right? And then currently I'm reading a book by Robert Greene called The 33 Strategies of War, actually. So Robert Greene actually is famous for writing the 48 Laws of Power. Um,
Wow.
and you know, running for office and just growing up, you just realize that there are realities about our world that it would do us well not to ignore, right?
Yes.
Because it really, if
Yes.
we really look at the thrust of history, it's really been about power, uh, empire, conquest,
Yes.
kings, right? And the fight for that. And it's still, you know, we seem to be so progressive now, have advanced so much, but there's still some things about human nature that are just there, right? And the search for power and control and you know the fight over resources and you know just how human nature deals with the challenges that we face, it's important for us to really understand that and so it's a great life book and life lessons that really give you some of the things that we're uncomfortable even thinking about, much less discussing. So it's been a great book so far. Those are some of the things I'm reading.
Awesome. Awesome. So this is my second to last question for you. How are you paying it forward? You know, this question was posed to me um, a while back by a woman who I deeply admire and respect. And I asked this to every person that I interview, how and in what ways are you paying it forward? Meaning like, how are you making a difference in the spaces that you are in?
Yeah. And you know, for me, the way I think about that is, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, I'm gonna get mine and then one day I'm gonna pay it forward or pay it back and stuff like
Right.
that. I think you have to, for me, think about your whole life as paying it forward. You know, your
Yeah.
whole life is dedicated in service, right? No matter what you're doing, because you know, some people think, oh, I'm in business, so I'm not really serving. I have to go into nonprofit in order to serve. No, if you're not serving, you know, when Steve Jobs, you know, created the iPhone, if he wasn't serving customers, they were not going to go buy that phone, right?
Right.
So if you want to make profits, you have to be serving somebody, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, that's one how you think about it, but two, also I think it's about you know mentorship, right? And you know, mentoring folks coming up in the next generation. When people ask you to be a mentor, that's a great, you know, compliment. And I usually say yes, unless I just absolutely can't. I usually say yes. And then also just being transparent along the journey, all right, and sharing, even using social media to share your journey, share the lessons that you're learning, all right. That helps a lot because a lot of people are watching, right, and they're listening and they're desiring a sense of direction. So they may not be able to necessarily talk to you all the time, but they're watching your journey and they're also internalizing the lessons that you know you're learning. So so doing that really helps. And then also just using my voice, you know. So if I'm fortunate enough to find myself at certain tables that not everyone who maybe looks like me is welcome, it's part of how you pay it forward is that you speak and you use your voice to speak on behalf of those who are not present at that table. So those are some of the ways that I think about.
All right, awesome, awesome, awesome. So my last question for you, and I always consider this a very, very, very fun question. What song will you use to describe yourself and why? And let me be real with you. I've gotten answers from Nuck If You Buck to Travis Green, You Made a Way, to a song from Braveheart. So give me your honest, authentic answer, Kojo.
Yeah, that's a great question. And top of mind for me, so you know, my best friend, who was also my best man in my wedding, and he lives in Ghana, and he travels back and forth all around the world. So we don't get to see each other a lot. And, it's been a challenging time, right? And so we've just been talking about all those things. And so he actually suggested a song for me to go listen to. And it was a song by Harry Job, who's a gospel artist, and it's called Surrounded. And in parentheses, it's Fight My Battles. Right? I was kind of like, what is he saying? What kind of song is this? Because I've been bumping personally J. Cole and DJ Khaled and Jay-Z and all that, right? So I don't really usually listen to kind of the contemporary gospel songs.
Yeah.
But man, I'll tell you, I've had this song on repeat over and over again.
Wow.
Some of the lyrics, it's like, says, it may seem like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by
Come on, vocals. Come on, vocals.
I sing it like that. Right? And then it just repeats, this is how I fight my battle.
Yeah.
This is how I fight my battle. Yeah. And so that whole notion of, it may seem like I'm surrounded because, there's so much that has gone wrong, right? And I'm trying my best and it's not enough. It's not good enough. So it may seem like I'm surrounded. I mean, from the outside looking in, it may seem as if, I'm just totally failing, right?
Yeah.
But the songstress says, but I'm surrounded by you, right? I'm surrounded by God. It reminds me of a story in the Bible in the Old Testament where I think God told the prophet, I think there were enemies approaching and the prophet was, scared. And God said, no, open your eyes, right? And God opened his eyes and he saw that there were more with us than there were with them, right? And so that is, I think that is, my story. And I want that to be indicative of my story where like, don't count me out, and it may seem like I'm surrounded and there are all these challenges and issues, but like they're here to elevate me, right? And I'm unconquerable. And I'll overcome and I'll be stronger for having gone through those challenges. And others will be inspired by my witness, right? And be able to see how I handle those issues and problems. So Carrie Job, and thank my best friend Obi for sending me that song. But Surrounded, it's a great song.
Awesome. Well, Kojo, thank you for coming on, man. I truly appreciate it. And it's a deep and profound honor. Everybody, Kojo Asamoa Caesar, please thank this guy for everything that he shared with us today. So thank you, Kojo.
Thank you, Lee. And man, keep doing what you're doing, man. It's important. It's very needed. And you're a sharp brother. And so I just had an honor.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Kojo. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. If you have not done it yet, subscribe today on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. To get more information about me and what I'm doing, email me at scottconsultations@gmail.com or follow me on social media on Twitter and especially Instagram at Lee A. Scott II or Lee A. Scott II. Thank you for watching this week's episode. I really appreciate it. Much love, and let's get started.